on Friday already knows for the city leadership of Iran that two of you are directed at the site. So Professor Rai is currently a research fellow at the Oxford Center for Indian Studies in Oxford. But she had earlier been a professor of the Center for Historical Studies at GNU and was the first chairperson of the National Monuments Authority of the Government of India, and where she was chairperson in 2015. The special area of research is the history of sea, and she's one of the world's foremost authorities on marine archaeology of the Indian Ocean, which includes history of the coastal areas of India and the Portugal. She has authored a number of books, including the Archaeology of Sea Trades, Oceans of Asia, published by Cambridge University Press in 2003. So, apart from giving the conversation series talk on Friday, she also very gracefully agreed to give a couple of additional talks, which are more like research seminars. But please feel free to ask questions. So, this is supposed to be a very interactive talk. And if there's any point at which you wish to stop the speaker and ask her questions, please feel free to do that. And so it's a pleasure to invite Sir Wright to give the first of the two talks. This is titled Inscribed Pots in the Indian Ocean.
I do this is that I think it's, we talk about inscriptions on stone, on copper plates and so on, but very seldom do we discuss inscriptions which are on pots. And why are pots important? Because in the time period that I'm talking about, which is 1st century BC to BCE to about the 6th, 7th century CE, pots played an important role both for transporting commodities, much like jute bags or containers or whatever else you have it today. But also as, now this, for example, is what would look like a thali to us. Now, what do we use that for? For serving, but also for giving donations or for presenting gifts to a ritual center. So it is these kind of pots that I think we need to look at more carefully. So the pot that you see here, this, like I said, is a sort of shallow, what we would describe best as is a thani. It comes from an Iron Age megalithic site, which is known as Kudumanal. It is a site which dates back to about the 5th century BCE. And we had talked about the megaliths last time, and we talked about the megalithic burials and how much of the writing or the graffiti that we see in the megalithic burials does continue in a later period. So this site is quite important, this site in Kudumanal, because it's not just a burial site, it's not just an Iron-Age burial site, but it also continues in the later period. It was excavated by Tamil University, Thanjavur, by Professor Rajan, who subsequently docked at Pondicherry University, and is important because one of the points that he's making, Professor Rajan is making, is that Tamil Brahmi dates to the pre-Ashokan period. Up to now, as most of you know, it was often argued that, and is still accepted, that it was really with the coming of the 3rd century BCE King Ashok that the writing was introduced. But Rajan and some of his colleagues are arguing that it is not just with the coming of Ashok, but you have, particularly in peninsular India, there is a much earlier beginning of writing, and Kudumanal is one of the sites which does provide us this evidence. So let me start by even defining and moving away from trade, because a lot of the maritime history and maritime context that one looks at is often in terms of trade. And how do I define this, and what, to me, is the agency, or what is important, what connects? Not just that, people carry the trade, they made profit and they carried goods, but is there a larger context to this, and what then is the crucial agent here? So as I would argue, the matter the spread of the religious writing, which I will talk about in detail today, trade, which is often discussed, migrations, but also ideas and technologies. So today I will focus on writing, but trade is not the only component of maritime networks, is what I would like to stress. The second point is, what is the agency? Who is the agency? And here I would say it's the sailing ship. We don't talk about ships either in history or in archaeology, and we were just discussing this at lunchtime about the underwater archaeology that does or does not exist in India. But we can discuss that if anybody's interested. Why are sailing ships important? Because to build a sailing ship, you needed material from all across the Indian Ocean. No country had everything. So we had the teak, but we didn't have the coir tied together. So to build a sailing ship required collaboration, cooperation across the ocean. Second point, who manned the sailing ship? This was, all ethnic communities. So let's keep race, ethnicity out of it, because this was diverse ethnic groups, diverse crew, diverse religions who form part of the sailing crew. Various people traveled on this. There were not just merchants, but also religious teachers, craftspeople, musicians, many others. And how do we identify these sailing ships? We identify them from the markers which are on the coast. And the critical element, as far as India is concerned, are the monsoons. And if anybody is interested in reading about how the monsoons affected particularly modern history, please look at Sunil Amrit's book, Unruly Waters, how mountains, rivers, and monsoons have shaped South Asia. So there's been a lot of work on monsoons and the way in which monsoons have shaped the history of India and of Southeast Asia. But I think a lot of this has to do with the modern period. We have much less data, and we still need to do much more work for the earlier periods. This is actually a ship being built on the Kannada coast. And what is very unique about the Indian Ocean is what is called the stitched vessels. If you could see this is stitching, like you stitch clothes. You stitch the planks together. And this coir used for stitching these vessels, it especially came from the Maldives. So the point I made earlier that yes, Kerala had the best teak or India had the best teak, but for stitching them together, for manning them, you required expertise from across the ocean. So it was not a sort of nationalist activity which any one country was able to do. And at the other end, this is this outrigger, which is from Goa. These are boats which again are smaller boats and are used much more for fishing. And today, a lot of this, the problem is a lot of this is used for fishing today, not for transoceanic sailing. But there's a whole history to that. And if there are any questions, we can talk about that later. How far does the antiquity of these sailing ships go? We at least know from the Ajanta paintings, which are dated in the early centuries of the Common Era, which show a sailing ship. And this is not a painting which occurs in a historical text. So it's a painting which illustrates a Jataka. A Jataka is a Buddhist story. It's the story of the previous birth of the Buddha. And in his previous birth, the Buddha was born as a navigator. The story is in the Suparaka Jataka. Supara, as some of you would know, is a place near Bombay, Mumbai. And as a navigator, the Buddha sailed with merchants. He, took them successfully across the waters and braved the many storms that occurred. But it has many, many layers. It's not a straightforward story of, the Buddha being born as a navigator and then taking this ship across. Because the different layers in this story relate to a merchant and the problems he had with his brother, so Kalyan Karan. It also has to do with the whole narrative of how how sailors from the west coast conquered Sinhala Dweepa, Sri Lanka, and it's the foundation story of Sri Lanka. It's in the Mahayan Buddhist text. So there are many layers to this. It's just one aspect I've talked about, but one can read many many aspects and many perspectives into this. But my main purpose in showing you this was couple of things. One, I've talked about the passengers and the fact that being a navigator was an important occupation. It was not something that was sort of, taken lightly. But also the other point was, what are ports doing here? Why are ports in this painting? These are the ports that are carrying the commodities. And we are back to where we started this lecture with that, institutions of ports, white ports. So ports are used for carrying commodities. We know a little bit about the construction. It's not a made to measure drawing of a ship. This is what the artist has drawn. It has imagination inside it, but it also raises the whole issue of danger at sea. And remember, more than now, the sea was not an easy space to cross. And you have here the Bodhisattva praying to the Buddha so that the merchants are not shipwrecked, that the merchants are not eaten up by the sea monsters, and that they sail successfully.
Sorry, you said it's 19th century. That one be right?
No.
The drawing is
the drawing is 19th century, because that's when. Sorry, you had a question? No.
Yeah. Is it common that the sailors would consider the ocean as a sacred entity? The ocean as
No. They're praying to is safe passage through storms.
Oh, not specific to this, just a general question. Generally, do people, these sailors, did they consider the ocean as a sacred entity?
Yes and no. The ocean is both a profitable space. If you sail and you come back alive, then your life is made. Your and your families. But the big issue is if you come back alive. So it is in that sense a sacred space. And yes, you're right. If you see today, if you see boat making yards today, before they launch the ship, they do prayers. There are coastal goddesses, different goddesses in different parts of the coast. Our coast is very large. Yes, they pray to that because you see this. The sea is dangerous, and one can get lost and shipwrecked. So yes.
But that prayer is happening for any kind of vehicle, not only for ship.
Well, those prayers, yes. The cars are also needed killed.
Yes.
Sorry, everybody's over. Sorry, jokes apart. But see, the person who's praying when buying a car is the person who takes ownership of the car. That person is not building the car. Whereas what we are looking at is, the people who are building the ship, then sailing the ship. So at each stage, when you start construction, when you launch the vessel in the waters, they pray. But yes, you consider if you consider by that logic, even we don't pray when we get into a flight. But the way
it's common even for any new things.
Not new things. Common enough for where you get danger, where there's danger coming.
You mentioned that they feared about whether a sea monster would attack them. So, my idea, what those sea monsters were? Is it familiar with the animals?
No, because the sea monsters are shown usually like a crocodile mouth. And you do have depictions on monuments. I don't have a depiction here. I don't have a slide with it. But you do have depictions, on Buddhist monuments at Bharat, for example, where the sea monster's mouth is like a crocodile, so it has opened its mouth and there is a boat going inside, and then you have the sailors praying. So yes, but you cannot identify. One cannot identify it. And the other interesting part about a lot of the early literature is that how do they identify the different seas? They identify the seas through flora and fauna. But somebody needs to look at that. So there is a sort of sea of milk, sea of fire, where and I would suppose there are places where I'm not the expert on this, where these organisms would produce light or something like that. So there are descriptions, but one would need to really identify that.
That is so. They don't have a connection with the current the animals which live inside the
one would have to work that out. Pericles, for example, says, how do you recognize the Gujarat coast? You recognize them by the black snakes which come to meet you. Now, I haven't done that kind of work. That what are these black snakes, and do they actually live on the Gujarat coast? But certainly that is possible to do. The marine life that they didn't do. Yeah. Okay, so the winds. I talked about the monsoons. That the monsoons are critical. But then we also hear that it was the Greeks who discovered the monsoons, and this has been, this is something which has been long talked about in secondary writings. But did the Greeks really discover the monsoon? And the Greek texts say that they discovered the monsoons, but we have our own texts which do talk about the winds. The Vedic texts talking about the winds and how Varuna was regarded in the ocean, and then also the Buddhist texts, and I've already talked about Suparna, the navigator. So when do people start moving across the ocean, and when does travel start? Does it really start with the coming of the Greeks, or is it much earlier? And archaeologically, we do know that crops and foodstuffs they moved across the ocean. So several crops, millets, which came from Africa to India, sandalwood one would think came from Karnataka, but archaeologically we do know that it came from Indonesia. Of course, there are many types of sandalwood, and the red sandalwood comes from Indonesia. The black peppercorns are known in Egypt. The ginger, for example, comes from Southeast Asia. So there has been a lot of work which shows that it long before the Greeks and the monsoons and the Pericles, the 1st century CE text, the Pericles, there was a lot of movement across the waters, and obviously people carried these plants, and these plants were then cultivated in different parts of the Indian Ocean world. There were also local trading networks, and these are third millennium BCE Bronze Age networks, where you have the network across the Gulf, the incense trading network, then the obsidian trading network. So we do know that both local and long distance movements occurred. The interesting part is the boat finds, the shipwrecks. India doesn't have any shipwrecks, unfortunately, not that early. But other countries do. And the Gulf has the earliest shipwreck that we find in Kuwait is 5000 BCE. And Southeast Asia has almost 100 shipwrecks. But that's a big lacuna. As far as India is concerned, the Western Indian Ocean or the Bay of Bengal, there are, I will talk about one shipwreck, that's in Sri Lanka, off Sri Lanka. So if we can claim it as ours, that's fine. But if we can't, then, we don't have it. So let's get back to writing. And let's get back to writing on forts. And why writing? Why write on forts? What was written? And what did these forts contain? So one kind of writing is what you see on this fort. This is a donatory inscription. So the inscription is in Brahmi, it starts here. it's 2nd century BCE. It was found in a Buddhist site, in a Buddhist monastic site near Delhi, Rohtak. And what it says is that it talks about the donation being made to this Buddhist monastery. So one is assuming that this pot contained items or commodities that were gifted to the monastery, and hence this donatory inscription was written around the pot. I have said that there are debates, and it is argued that writing in South India was pre-Ashokan, and that there is a case for looking at the megalithics more closely. There is also the case that, and this is made in the context of the Harappan script, that the person who controlled writing, in a way, controlled the cities or controlled trade. And this is what Mark Kenoyer, the person who's excavated Harappa, he talks about as far as writing and the Harappan context is concerned. But what is largely neglected, as I have said, is this writing that occurs on small fragments of pottery and what it says. There's another aspect, I think, to writing, which is language. Because while we have the Brahmi script, there's no one language that is used. There are many languages, Sanskrit, Prakrit, Tamil, and Sinhala. What is also quite interesting is the new work that's being done on the Ashoka. This map you saw the other day as well, and I had talked about this as the earliest, so we're not going there today. But the interesting part is that the new work shows that the Buddhists were using specific terminology and were using specific linguistic idioms to establish their distinctive identity. And which shows that even within the Ashokan period, or even within these writings that we know of the Mauryan period, there was no uniformity, that they were being used by different groups, yet their boards for uniqueness or their own sort of distinctiveness, as it were. There's another interesting aspect of writing, which is writing on a Buddhist relic caskets. I'm just wondering if anybody has any ideas on what these Buddhist relic caskets would be, and what would writing on Buddhist... I mean, a lot of it is written here, but what this writing would mean, and why have this writing on what I call Buddhist relic containers? I mean, what are these? What do these containers have? I mean, anybody has any thoughts on that, or any suggestions, or
They contain remains of Buddha or other famous Buddhist monks.
yes.
And so this writing would identify the remains.
Yes. So the inside this pot where the writing is, there would be other pots, smaller pots. You know, like you have those Russian...
Matrushka.
Yeah, absolutely. And the pots inside would have the gold or the ash. All right. Now, the second question is, do they... This writing usually says who is donating this. Because after all, where is this pot going to go? It is going to go inside, it is going to be enshrined in a scoop. So a scoop is going to cover it. So this writing will never be seen. This writing is only for that occasion when this pot is being taken in ceremony and is being sort of enshrined in a scoop. Now, the third point is name of the donor. Name of the donor. But it is often, it will say, this contains the remains of the Buddha. Now that is a question mark. Because remember, the Buddha, the date of the Buddha is 6th, 5th centuries BCE. And we are looking at here, we are looking at here, say, 1st, 2nd century CE. So we are already looking at least 500 years later. Now, there are, and these inscribed reliquaries, they appear not only, most people believe they appear only in the northwestern part of the subcontinent in the Gatharan areas, but they occur also in Agra. I'll show you the map in a moment. But the point is that often out of reverence to what is being given, the inscription would say, I am donating this to set up a stu to enshrine the remains of the Buddha. So who is being enshrined sometimes is clear, like in Sanchi, not all the time. But the person who is writing his or her name, that's what the inscription says, that I give this donation. And it is argued that there was a big ceremony which was held. I'll just talk about that in a moment. So this is what a mound would look like. You see this pile of bricks, which is called a mound, and the relic casket would be enshrined inside it. This was never to be seen ever again. So now the question is, how did we get it? I mean, how did I get that picture? Where did it emerge? It was never supposed to come out. So it emerged because when archaeology started in the 19th and 20th centuries, it became very obvious to archaeologists that these mounds of brick contain treasure. So what do? They dig a hole from there, on top, into the center part of the mound. And what do you find there? You find the reliquaries, the gems, because you just don't throw the bones of the Buddha and you put it there, but you put ornaments, gold, precious stones, coins often. So these were then dug out in the 19th and 20th centuries, and they were sold to museums. So that's another story, but that's how they emerged, because they were not supposed to be seen by anybody once it went inside. Okay, now the second interesting part is that if you look at the Andhra coast, this is the place for Kattiprodu, where the river Krishna meets the sea. But what is striking is this coastal orientation of these sites, which contain relics. Now, why have Buddhist sites along the coast if it has nothing to do with sailing or with maritime connectivity? Another aspect. This is an ancient mount, Kattiprodu, like I mentioned, where Krishna meets the sea. 1870, it was,
These relics, are they sealed or?
The relics are.
Are they sealed? Like, can you open it? Or?
They were initially, now, this material is in the Madras Museum. Because when they were taken out, whom did it belong to? The person who took it out. So, and a lot of museums now have, the Kattiprodu material is actually in Madras Museum. They do not show the reliquaries, the small crystal ones, but I'll show you the caskets. Those are there. So if you go visit them, it might help them to, put some lights there, sorry. But the big caskets, stone caskets are there. So 1892, the excavations happened, and you can see this channel on top, and this is where the relics were kept, right, in the center of the mound. And then you have this, the Buddhist stupa all around it. But what is interesting about Kattiprodu are the inscriptions. 3rd to 1st century, these are the earliest inscriptions in Tamil Brahmi. And for a long time, Kattiprodu was considered the earliest site where Tamil Brahmi inscriptions were found. They tell us a great deal about relic enshrinement. What was the procedure that was followed? So these are parchmark coins which were arranged below. These are the stone containers, And there is a hole here inside which would be the relic casket. And inside that relic casket would be the small reliquary which would have the poems. And there are this inscription. And these inscriptions talk about who was present at the ceremony, who came, who attended, who gave what. And what is very clear, and we are talking 1st to 3rd century BCE, that there was a complex agency involved. There were donors, certainly, but they were also members of larger groups. So there's this references to Boshti, association. There is a reference to the Raja, so there is political power. So the point I'm making is that this was not some, isolated ritual ceremony which some Buddhists went in some corner and, did it, but that this was a major event at which the Raja came, the merchant associations came, the Shramanas came, the monks came, and when presumably some of this, what was written on the pots, was read out to all the people who gathered, but then it was finally put inside. And look at the elaborate arrangements that were made. So you have the coins arranged beneath these stone containers, and then the stone containers, the inscription on that, and the reliquary inside it. And this was a crystal reliquary. In the Madras Museum.
And why is the script there, the modern Telugu script?
It's translated. What is the script that is used originally is the Brahmi, which is of this one.
And this is the modern Telugu script. The Rapis.
That's the Tamil Brahmi that, and Telugu comes from the Brahmi script.
Wait, you mean they replaced it there?
No, they haven't replaced it.
That is the modern script.
When he published it, he would have, the person who excavated would have written it. Because the original script there is a Tamil Brahmi script.
So what is the date of the reliquary?
This is 1st to 3rd centuries, 3rd to 1st century BCE. Yeah. So these are BCE reliquaries. So it's already 300 years after the Parinirvana of the Buddha. The other thing that occurs along with all these Buddhist sites are the inscribed potsherds. So starting from Shanikunda, which is a Buddhist site here, we've already talked about Katiprolu. Vadamanu is a site. This is Amravati. Katiprolu is here. Vadamanu is a site close to Amravati, and many of these Buddhist sites also have inscribed pottery. So you see the number of pots or inscribed shards that occur starting from Arikamedu, which is often referred to as a Roman port. Arikamedu is right here. It also has a megalithic substratum, and going up to Shanikundam in the north and Vadamanu. Most of these early centuries of the Common Era have yielded inscribed shards. Now, what are the pots on which writing occurs, and what is the nature of these pots, and do these pots have any sort of larger implications? We earlier talked about, and which was my opening screen as well, these dishes on which there were inscriptions. But these dishes also have very specific kind of decoration. They are sort of gray to black in color. So that's the fabric of the ceramic. They are flat-faced shallow dishes, and they have this roulette decoration inside it. And when it was found, the first site where this pottery was found was Arikamedu, and when it was found, it was argued that this is Roman pottery, and that, Arikamedu hence is a Roman port. But we just talk about that a bit more, because if you look at the total distribution of this pottery, it starts from Bengal, up there, all around the east coast, into Sri Lanka and into southern Sri Lanka here. And one of the sites here is the Samarama, which has been excavated by German and Sri Lankan team for many years, and very systematically excavated. But if one counts the number of sites all along this, the major cluster is in Andhra. And this is Arikamedu on the Tamil coast, where it was first found, but the major clustering is in Andhra and not so much dating on the Tamil coast. And these are all from, not from Andhra, but all this writing is from Sri Lanka. And all the writing is from the site of this Samarama. It dates very early, 4th, 3rd centuries BCE, so prior to the coming of Ashok. But what is there anything that strikes you about some of these? Much of this has been deciphered by Harry Falk, and this is all Brahmi. This is what Brahmi is on these. Does anything strike you about these legends? Anything that sort of, really juts out, or anything striking? The names? The names, all right. Why? The names in donor inscriptions, they give the names. They will say, I, so and so, give this donation. Thank you. Yes. So usually donations and gifts are associated with monks, with kings, with merchants. Who are they associated with here? With nuns, female novices. What does this mean? That, a monastery by the water. Then again, I think there's another nun out there, an inscription by the nun out there. So the Buddhist nuns were also traveling. They could have gone to Sri Lanka by land. So the interesting part of these inscribed pottery shards is the fact that it's not just merchants, travelers, monks who are traveling, but also nuns, also female novices. And this pottery, of course, has been dated to 4th, 3rd centuries BCE, and there are about 126 shards which have been found at this Samarama. But even more interesting is the spread. So this Samarama is here. This is Arikamedu. This is the stretch that we were looking at where the related ware has been found. But there's related ware all across the ocean. This is the Malay Peninsula, Java, North Java, Bali here, Sempiran, Bali. This is Vietnam. This is the west coast, Egypt, Iran or Egypt. So this pottery, obviously somebody's carrying it. So who's traveling? It's if we take this only the ceramics as the database, then certainly the Buddhist monks and nuns are traveling across the ocean and are traveling as early as 13th century BCE. And this is based on the analysis of the pottery and on the analysis of the inscriptions on the pots. But this Samarama is also interesting from another point of view. When I had said that we don't have shipwrecks, this Samarama, the site of Bodhavaya down there, has the earliest shipwreck in these waters, the Indian Ocean waters. And this is a wreck which was recently means 3-4 years ago, which was discovered. The site itself goes on for a very long time because we also have Persian pottery, Chinese ceramics at that site. The ship, it seems, carried a cargo of iron ingots. Saddle quotes are count that's used for grinding, either medicines or spices. But this is the only shipwreck site and the earliest shipwreck site that we have in the Indian Ocean waters. And this throat is sadly poor and blue slide, so it is used for grinding, often also used for grinding medicines. And we do have references at the Samarama to an Arogyashala, or a place where the Buddhist monks received medicinal herbs and things like that. It lies in the proximity of a fishing village, Vodavaya. It has a whole lot of legends associated with it. So again, this is a very complex site, which is not straightforward. It is not that there was a fishing village, there was a fort, and then you have a shipwreck site. But in addition to the fishing village, the port, the shipwreck site, there are inscriptions of kings talking about revenues, transfer of custom duties. There are imports from India, and the surprising animal imported are horses, because normally it's argued that India did not have horses, and horses were imported in India from Caribbean itself. But there's also carnelian bead. The carnelian comes from the Western Deccan, and of course the pottery that I talked about.
Critical time frame versus
Which one? Horses. This is they are basing it on the shipwreck that they have found, and they are arguing that this is tentative results. These are not permanent results. That what was imported into Sri Lanka were horses. So that's unusual, because we have that whole discussion about where the horses came or where they were branded.
But this is sufficiently late so as not to have any conflicts with the odds debate.
No. That debate, that horse debate is no, we're not going there.
Yeah.
But it's argued that right through, even the British were breeding horses in Australia. There is an argument which is made that right through the medieval period, the horses were imported, Arab horses were got. Because either Indian climate or the breed was not now. Okay, now you have to make a distinction between war horses, horses as pack animals. Yes, so it's the sort of war horses, and the horses, the cavalry, so the soldiers would stand and so on. So there's a whole discussion there on.
So Indian might have used it as a passage of substitution, right? As the athletes may not be producing the horses, but maybe just the
But yes, and you do have horse boats. Yes, thanks. Because you do have horse boats in megaliths in Vidarbha. And these megaliths again date, it's late for that story, but they certainly date from the 6th, 5th centuries BCE onwards. So this is again this the Maharava and the Gracito on a plot, the site, and the other where it is, which is here, and the other things that go with it. So clearly then the Samarama is again quite a complex site. It's a political center, religious center. It's also a foster center, where trade is being carried on. I talked about there's a lot better way of translating Arogyashala. The term hospital is used, but where medicines are provided. And this is a site that is really coming up in a big way, largely due to the sort of very systematic and detailed explorations that are added on. So let's move to the larger region within which our potsherds have been found. This is the site of Berenike in Egypt, on the Red Sea coast. and I have said that you get this related wave from here all the way up to Vietnam, and these really come from excavated sites. Beranite is a very, very interesting site, and again, is a site which has been excavated for more than 20 years. It's been excavated by partly by the Americans, also by the Polish, by the Egyptians themselves. And because of the careful way in which excavations were done, it has yielded a lot of organic material, including cloth, textiles, which usually don't occur because, they decay and organic material doesn't survive. But A, because of the climate, and B, because of the controlled excavation, textiles have been found. These textiles actually have been shown to come from India at Beranite. It's a multi-religious site. This was part of the Roman Empire. So when we talk about Roman trade, we need to be very careful that the Roman Empire in Egypt is very different, and particularly at Beranite, is very different from the Roman Empire in the Mediterranean or in Italy. At Beranite itself, there are several religious structures, and there are also images of the Buddha which have been found recently. There's the shrine of the Pearl Idols, the Isis temple. There's a Christian church. Christianity comes into the Indian Ocean fairly early, 5th century, and even earlier. There's the legend of St. Thomas, 1st, 2nd century. There is an historic Christian presence in the Western Indian Ocean. But also, now look at the last point, that certainly Gujarat is known to be in touch or in contact, because you have the coins, the Kshatrapa coins, which have been found at Beranite. But more importantly, and more for my purposes, the potsherds that have been found have been inscribed in 11 different languages. So, what this tells us is the diversity of the maritime network. The people who were traveling were not speaking one language. They did not have one religion. They did not belong to, one political power. So, unlike what the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, which is the 1st century CE Greek text would have us believe, between 3rd century BCE and for these 800 years, the 6th century, Beranite flourished. It hosted many communities. There are Tamil Brahmi shards which have been found there. So Tamil certainly was one of the languages that was spoken. But there are 11 different languages in which these potsherds have been inscribed. There are also Tamil Brahmi shards from here, from the South Arabian coast. These are very similar to some of the ship representations of the Satavahana poets. This is a bronze image which comes from India. Then you have fish vertebrae being used for beads, and this is certainly marine fish. So the same kind of beads occur on the Gujarat coast. But also important are the islands. When we talk about histories, we talk about histories of countries and mainland, but seldom of the islands. And I could go on and on about Maldives, which is Fisher's Buddhist, or about Mumbai, which was islands before it became the capital or the financial capital that we know. But let's look at Socotra. This is a very strategic island off the coast of Yemen. Today, Socotra is famous as a place for biodiversity. It's also a World Heritage Site for biodiversity. But what one should also think about is its cultural significance and the kind of data that we get from Socotra, which is Brahmi inscriptions. So there are about 200 graffiti drawings as small offerings. And these are inside a cave. There's a very long cave which was explored. The cave was opened out on the coast. And so people, this cave was clearly a shrine, a sanctuary, where people went. They wrote inscriptions, and you see the number of languages. The largest number of inscriptions are in the Brahmi script, 192. One is in Kharoshthi, but you do have Vaxian, Greek, Palmyran, or Aramaic, and you have ancient Hopian script, Haxumite, and certainly these graffiti, they occur in clusters. So it's very clear that some parts of the cave were particularly this edge part of the cave. That's where the sanctuary was. So it's not something which occurs randomly. It's not something that people were, passing by and they wrote their names like people write on monuments. But this is a very long cave. They actually went inside. They prayed for their safe voyage, safe return. Inscribed these, left this graffiti or these inscriptions here. And these are the inscriptions which have now been discovered and deciphered. And these inscriptions are in Sanskrit and Prakrit, and refer to several occupations, including they refer to Buddhist monks. They also refer to Ujjain. They also refer to centers in Gujarat, in Western India. They talk about, they're very small inscriptions. They're not very long inscriptions. They're very small inscriptions. They usually mention just a name and where the person came from, because there are no donations that are made. This is, just a sort of small sanctuary at which they left their inscriptions. But from the drawings that they made and the drawings that they left, it is very clear that the people who visited here were involved in maritime sailing. And so finally, I would like to end by arguing that this is an interesting terracotta, which shows, some would argue, this is the giant Buddha learning how to write on a tablet. And these are the Brahmin letters that was writing on the tablet. This is it's broken, and it is in the National Museum in Delhi. But that, if we look at its striped pottery, what we see there are several intersecting networks across the Indian Ocean. There's certainly the traveling monks and nuns, which I've talked about. There are also Brahmins who are traveling, and we do see this in the Saputra. There is there is metal that is being traded across the ocean. Carnelian, crafts groups and merchants traveling, but also, the fishing communities and the salt making and the exchange of dried fish. Birding is another occupation that is carried on. But finally, what we need to look at, or what we need to find, are shipwreck sites, because these shipwreck sites will then indicate local and regional connectivity. But these shipwreck sites, as of now, we do not. So thank you very much for your attention, and I end it.
Questions, comments?
X.
Yeah.
I mean, appeared to me, it was.
Sorry, now
I mean, looked at slave trade network.
Yes. The slave trade, we don't get the same kind of slave trade that we do, that the Greeks and Romans had. And, which is sort of famous from films like Spartacus, so on. I don't know if you've seen it. But we do have references in the Fericrus, the Greek text, to dancing girls coming into India. And dancing girls coming, one of the places they're coming from is Saputra. I'm not sure why. But the terms that are used in the Arthashastra and its Sanskrit texts is the use of, slave is the wrong translation of that. Dasa used for household work, not dasas used in production. So there is a difference in the people who were coming in. But yes, there are references certainly to dasagas.
Yeah, that is one. I was referring more to like could be road.
These are all sailing ships, and so you use the sails. See, the rowing ships are the ones that we see in the Mediterranean. The rowing ships, the one you're talking about, where the slaves are used. These are across the Mediterranean. The Indian Ocean is a very different terrain. It's much larger. These are sailing ships. They use the oar, but oar is used for directionality, for changing course, for steering. Yeah, thanks. For steering, and for finding your way. And the other references that are made is it's very difficult to find the Indian coastline if you're coming from the sea, because the Indian coastline is very flat. There are no mountains or no sort of protuberances which identify. Remember, you don't have maps. So how do you identify the coast? How do you identify where you are on the sea? So these are sailing ships. So you use sails, not rowers. The ones that you're referring to are in the Mediterranean, and certainly the Greeks and the Romans use those. But that's not the pattern in the Indian Ocean. Yeah, you had a question. Sorry.
Are there any guesses as to why we don't have shipwreck sites?
We haven't done the research. We haven't done the work. We don't do underwater archaeology. Sorry.
But so usually in these shipwreck sites, what are the remnants that are found? Like what kinds of objects?
Okay, so a couple of things. In Indonesian borders, they found a lot of shipwreck sites. And shipwreck sites usually occur where it's a stormy sea. And the ship gets wrecked. Now, the problem is, how do you find a shipwreck site? I mean, after all, in this huge water, expanse of water, you can't sort of go looking for a shipwreck site. So in Indonesian waters, when they have been found, it's usually the fishermen who have found the shipwreck sites. And how do they identify them? Because when the remains of the ship, when it rots and there are all the organic remains, the fish they sort of cluster there. So the fishermen can identify where and if the fish are there, the birds come. You see, so you have to know the markers. So then they see all these mark indications, and then they go and dive there, and find the wrecks. And the shipwrecks that have been found in Southeast Asia date as early as the 1st, 2nd century CE. So they're fairly early. By the 9th, 10th century, these ships carried enormous amounts of Chinese pottery, Chinese porcelain, which is very expensive in the art market, and which sells for huge amounts of money. So when these fishermen find these shipwrecks, now comes the more complex story. So whose waters are these? Who controls them? What is the legislation? Can anybody just dive and find the shipwreck and take off? So what they usually do is take the ceramics, the porcelain, sell it off, and once it appears in the market, then the authorities sort of suddenly find, so something's happening here. So certainly there are a lot of shipwreck sites in Southeast Asian waters, but these shipwreck sites have also then gone into all kinds of problems with legislation, with ownership. I mean, if I can tell the story of the Tang shipwreck. So this was a 9th century shipwreck which was found off one of the small islands of Indonesia. Now, as far as the Indonesian law goes, see, it takes a lot of money to raise a shipwreck. You know, you can't just, like on land, you can't just sort of find things or being into like the super cells. The Indonesian government did not have the money to raise this 9th century tongue shipwreck. So they agreed when a German agency, commercial agency, agreed to salvage it. But what happens when a commercial agency does it, as opposed to when professionals do it, is that the commercial agency is more interested in profits. I mean, after all, they're going to invest all that, they have to get their money back. They can't sort of sink that money into that shipwreck. So they did not, I mean, because the shipwreck is not the whole ship, it's never discovered. It's some voting members, they're the cargo. And it's easier with the cargo is Chinese porcelain. So anyway, so it was found off the island of Belitung. So this Belitung shipwreck was recovered by this German commercial agency. And the terms were that they could sell some part of the cargo. And that created a huge furor in the academic world, saying that, you know, this is not done and you can't set up, it's like setting off your treasures, you know, setting off museum objects and so on and so forth. And in fact, the Smithsonian had arranged an exhibition of the Belitung shipwreck but cancelled it because of the hullabaloo that was created. Then came a foot Chinese person, businessman. He bought the entire remains of the shipwreck and he exhibited it in Singapore. And the whole narrative of what this ship was, the terminology changed from it being the Belitung shipwreck, because that's where it was found, to it being a Tang shipwreck, which is of the Tang dynasty of China. And at Singapore, how did it get to Singapore in the past? Singapore didn't come into existence in the 14th century. Shipwreck is 9th century. So this is, you know, Singapore was always an entrepot. So if today you go to the Asian Civilizations Museum, you can see the Tang shipwreck as a proud, should one say, symbol of ancient Singaporean entrepreneurship. So my apologies if this offends anybody, but there's a lot on the net. Please read it. Don't take my word for it. Do just Google Belitung shipwreck and you get the whole story.
There are books on it.
There are books of it as well. So that's the whole politics of shipwrecks. So I mean, I'm not interested in the politics. I'm just interested that the Indian government or somebody in India would do something and find shipwrecks.
Opportunity for an Indian craft.
What you undo what you have done.
Sorry, yeah, knew that.
I think that much. Know about the square thing. So, I mean, you can get it easily from the coconut tree, the coconut foil, and make it. And they were already trading from the western coast. So, do you think like Maldives would only supply the coils, then also they would make the sailing ship and they would then sail it farther? Like, the resource material is already available on the west coast.
No, so you need very specific. It's on the book, the fiber foil. You know, it has to be rated. I think it comes from specific sound on the Maldives, and the Maldives is also sort of like quarries where you're. Yeah. So the coir for this is coming from the Maldives. And the point I'm making is that, the resources for making a sailing ship, a wooden sailing ship, not the iron ship that we have here, comes from various places. The teak comes from the West Coast, but also there are other woods that can be used. But certainly the coir is coming from Bombay, not so much on the West Coast. The ships are being made also in Arabia. Arabia doesn't have the wood. But in Oman and other places, they are making the wooden ships.
Like a stitching type of ship is still being.
It is still being, what is being, the stitching is still done, but now it's for fishing. Now it's no longer for cargo carry. These are not. But the wooden, what they now call the cows, the wooden cows, they are still being made. There's Bepur, it's made. I mean, Bepur is a major yarn. Mandavi is another. Bepur on Karnataka. These cows are being made, but these are again wooden cargo carrying boats, but they are not sailing. They're not using sails. They are using engines. So, you can't expect things to remain unchanged. So things change, and so now it's engines, but they are still wooden ships. And these are the cows which still sail from Gujarat to Socotra to East Africa. And there is a Sakotri Mata temples which are all over Gujarat. And they still pray to that Sakotri Mata. Now, whether that comes from Socotra, whether that's independent, that's...
Yeah. Regarding these commodities like the potteries, do you think it's the case that initially some of the shipments or the whatever is getting transported was mainly motivated by utility, and then it later went on to have different purposes like decoration and
So the commodities or the pottery? The pottery, which one?
I
guess what you're saying is the pots.
Yeah.
Whether the pots initially were utilitarian,
And then it really
then they became decorative.
I'm just asking, is there any trend like that?
See, there is all kinds of pots. So you certainly have storage jars, which are utilitarian. Cooking pots, which are utilitarian. But there's always been a kind of hierarchy of pottery, like hierarchy of all material goods. So, there is the sort of rough fabric, coarse pottery, and then there's the fine pottery, which takes more resources, better skilled artisans, and so on. So there is a hierarchy of pottery. And what occurs across the ocean is two kinds of pottery. One is the coarse pottery, coarse Indian pottery, especially the handi type, which I think we still use, in Indian kitchens, or what still finds it in these pottery shops, which is used for cooking. So these coarse cooking pots are found along the coast of, the South Arabia and places like that. But the pottery that I was referring to, this related bed, this is the fine one. It's polished. It's sort of. What is interesting is also that you also find this same related ware, then mended. They mend it with wire, with small wire things. So obviously it's important. Otherwise, if it breaks, you just throw it away. You make another one. So. There is this hierarchy
it's more like a geographical distinction. Like in some regions, you find certain types of pot.
Yes, absolutely.
Is there a chronological distinction as well? Like you expect certain types of commodities to appear first when it comes to trade, followed by things which have more than utility, like decoration, rituals.
In terms of commodities.
Commodities in general, but maybe you can take pottery as an example.
See, pottery, pottery, there is a certain paradigmatic pottery, which is redware, which is everywhere. Then there is this specific pottery, which I said, related ware, or, there are other russet ware, other kinds, which are more, should one say, the higher end. So they are more restricted. But the coarse one is paradigmatic, right? The storage jars are coarse pottery paradigmatic. So now commodities. I think this one thing that I would like to say very clearly out here. You know, when we've always, from school onwards, have been taught to think that it's agriculture which is important, right? Agriculture yields surplus, yields iron, yields civilization. But this is not quite correct. What about the fishing communities? Now, would the commodities be the same as required by coastal communities as compared to those required in the Ganga Valley, which is the flat, fertile, or the dead Kaveri Delta or whatever else dead? No, because the fishing, and what about the marine resources? What are the marine resources? Salt. There is no agricultural society which can do without salt. Where does salt come from? It comes from the sea. The pearls, very early, even, that Atiprodu casket I showed, pearls are one of the items which were donated. Where are pearls coming from? Who is diving for pearls? Not the agriculturists. So, I think the crucial point is we need to rewire our brains. And instead of looking at agriculture, civilization, delta areas at Ganga Valley, we need to look at marine resources, coastal communities, fishing and sailing communities, hierarchies within fishing and sailing communities. The fishing and sailing communities start by fishing, but then they, upward mobility, they own the ships. Who owns the ships? Who's sailing the ship? I mean, not the merchant sitting in Delhi. So I think that one needs to think of this ocean not as an extension of the land, but as a space in its own. And that's the bottom line that I would like to stress.